into the questions now. And I think we can think about maybe approximately 5 minutes or so for each of the 4 questions that we plan to ask. And hopefully everybody will have a chance to jump in and share some information. So just we'll get going with that now. The first question, what are the top messages from the keynote conversation with Marina that from your knowledge and experience would help grow and strengthen a network such as the one that you're involved with or with ICANN itself?
I could start, David, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you, Lori.
All right. Sure. Well, I'll go ahead and jump in. And I sort of alluded to this at the end of my presentation and ran out of a little bit of time there at the end. So I just wanted to circle back with the idea that Marina presented about stakeholder analysis. I think that's a really important I think that's a really important technique is honing in on why you're building something, who you're building it for, and how to reach those audiences. Developing a network that meets those needs. And I think that she made a really good point about having funders, users, and then outreach are pretty key as you move forward. I think that that's a great way to help get people engaged, get people using your network when you kind of identify those audiences. We've done that through the Digital Coast Partnership, and it has been very powerful. It's very powerful to have others carry your message for you, whether that's in a funding or outreach scenario, but it also helps to expand how and where your products are getting used because they're going to places that you might not necessarily be. And so it's a great thing to think through.
Thanks, Lori.
Maybe Connor?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this because what really struck me from Laurie's earlier presentation was the idea of the Atlas back to being the Atlas as a book, as opposed to being the Atlas as being digital, and how difficult it is to understand, to echoing there what Laurie was saying, who your stakeholders are, and indeed who your audience is. I mean, when you're producing the Atlas as a book, it's beautiful. The pictures that we were seeing there were beautiful, and the message was coming across very clear in those illustrations. And it's much harder to do that in a digital Atlas, generally because we're still very preoccupied with the technology in the background, and it gets difficult to keep a track of who the audience is. And it's something we're very concerned of in European Atlas of the Seas. And so it's just a thing that struck me from seeing the digital print. And it just reminds me that I actually have back in my home a 1960s Atlas, the Reader's Digest Atlas of the World. And I still go to it all the time. So I just wonder how can we learn from, or how can we make digital atlases better based on what the experiences with the printed atlases. And I think Laurie was touching on it there where with the stakeholder and understanding your users better. Sorry, I ended up with a question.
Anya, would you like to share some thoughts?
Well, I think the who do you do it for is a very important question, and one question that from my experience in the project I have been involved have not always been answered before the Atlas was actually developed. But I also think that sometimes, even if you develop an Atlas and there's a lot of, you might think it's not really that useful for a specific audience, there are unexpected spin-offs apart from the capacity building. I've had the experience now in Africa, not only in our region, in my marine spatial planning context with other African countries, that all that work we did for the African Marine Atlas, where we often thought who's going to use it, was actually the basis of lots of the planning for the MSP. So although you should think of your stakeholders, you should not do something because you feel there's no immediate need for it, because sometimes it takes a bit. And with our ACMA, I've really seen that.
Thank you, Anya. Carolina.
Sí, gracias. Sí, estaba pensando un poco el
Yes, well, I was thinking about what Anya said. Our own atlases were concerned on an already predefined audience, but as a strategy for publication to reach a broader public, I think this is really important to be able to combine all these elements, from the technical to the artistic, to make it more appealing and to have users become curious about maybe the title or the physical format that goes against all our digital way of doing things right now. So I think that this is something that we should consider to have a greater outreach to our audiences.
Thank you, Carolina. Marina, any thoughts to add?
I was just thinking about the idea of, technology as a distraction and platforms and the physical presence of something, and the fact that even if it is digital, we're all still creating these things based on, like a place. And so coming back to that place that we're collecting the data about and that we're describing in all the ways, whether digital or physical, is something that it often gets lost. I've worked around a lot of the technology, and that can be all consuming, right? Is what's the next upgrade, and does it work with cesium or whatever the technology problem is, rather than like centering back on the place and what is the problem of the people or the animals that are living in this place that we are building this atlas around, right? Like, what's that problem that we're trying to solve? And Jeff and some others had mentioned AR and VR, and it's so funny because it's something that I work in, and I think it's super important. And also, that is definitely a space where you have to fight to keep the people and the place at the center and not get sucked into the technology and the features that you want to be building into what you're doing.
Great, thank you. I think I'm going to move on to the next question here, and that is that the theme for ICANN 9 is from local to global, benefits of web atlas sharing and connectivity. I'm wondering how we might be able to best embrace that meeting theme.
I'll just echo now just what Marina just said there about keeping things focused to on the individual and the place. So one of the things that we find challenging with the Atlas, the European Atlas, is that we're taking in we're at a very high level, but we're taking in data and information from European member states. So we're still dealing with those technology problems of how you merge all these data sets. For example, we have a bathymetry product that comes through eModnet, because there's no single bathymetry product for Europe, but it comes through eModnet to us, and we display it in the center in the map. But it's important that these products are then available to everybody outside of our own European Atlas of the Seas, so that the people building other atlases for other themes or for other uses can get the benefits of these extremely high quality products. And it's something that I myself have advocated for a long time, is the idea that with open data and open data licenses, you can share these amazing scientific products around the world. There's no point in reinventing the wheel on them, because the quality assurance has been done already. So it's then you're going from a situation that when you use these products from a technical challenge of displaying and showing these products, such as bathymetry products, to a creative process of telling stories with the products. So I would very much encourage that we promote the open sharing of data and products from the atlases around the globe, so that other people with other ideas can bring those products together to tell stories.
Thank you, Connor. Other thoughts?
I actually would just like to comment on Marina's example of the Humboldt. That one really, I mean, I can't wait to get a copy of the atlas, although I don't know how easy it is to get it to Namibia. Because I think that's a very good example of how local information, local experiences actually span across the entire world. And I think I think it's on day 3 where we talk about indigenous knowledge, that I think often we forget to even map indigenous knowledge because we think it's irrelevant. But I think it's important to look and document that knowledge and bring it out to the world. And we probably will find that there will be a lot more connections than just the Humboldt anchoveta that has a connection with the entire world. Just a brief thought.
Thanks, Anya.
Yeah, I'd like to follow on to Anya's comments. I totally agree, and couldn't more emphatically echo what you're saying. We are working in my agency to really take a better look at how we can be more inclusive to folks, particularly in tribes and out in the territories. One of the challenges that we are recognizing a little bit more is that not everybody has the bandwidth to access digital products. And so as we kind of expand these networks and try to make them more accessible and inclusive, thinking about going back to paper atlases and going back to paper maps and going back to technology that is a little bit more accessible in areas where bandwidth is limited or non-existent could be really impactful. Oftentimes those folks that are living in those areas, they're on the fringes of the king tides, of the plastic invasions, of sea level rise, of all of those issues. They're on the front lines and they really need the help and the resources. And I think there could be a huge opportunity for the ICANN network to think about that and to think about how you could better reach those communities through this technology and data.
Thank you, Lori. Carolina.
Quisiera mencionar solo un poquito algo de la experiencia.
I
de los
just
datos
want to
en América Latina.
say something about our experience in Latin America. And this has to do with the need of information exchange. Yes, technology was an issue, I agree, in our country, but well, we really need to be team players and we need to share the capabilities that other countries do have and maybe could share with other countries that are ready to learn, and maybe they can benefit from this training in other technologies. And this is something that should be done on a continuous basis. And I think it would help in efforts such as ours. I think it's really important to share resources.
Great, thank you, Carolina. Marina, a wrap up on this question?
Sure. When working with the King Tides Project, there was one year where there was an organizer who wanted to get started, and she was in Mauritius. And the government there had done a study on sea level rise, but then kind of like suppressed it because it was not great. And it would have required a lot of major infrastructure investment or moving people off island. And so she was a fellow at a university, and she came in and wanted to do this project, and she got started. And it was interesting because she hit all of these issues, right? The technology problem, the environmental justice aspects. Again, it was mostly poorer people who were living at risk. And she got really far in doing that. And it was very interesting to me to see the kind of resources that she needed and that she didn't have. Technology was not really a limiting factor there. It was actually doing something with the data that the locals collected, which they actually collected sort of like in defiance of the government's, what the government had done around sea level rise. And it really made me think at that time about, and so the Mauritius project was looking at like Kiribati and other small island developing nations to see like what other folks in the area were doing and what they could learn from. And so they were getting a lot of infusion of technology and knowledge from some areas, but then also working within their own networks with you know, like their own peer, sort of like peer communities to learn how they could kind of bond together and work at their level. So I feel like what folks just mentioned was, it really just brought me back to that time of looking at like a very three-dimensional network of how each node in that network is going to have different needs and how that network can, or how individual nodes of the network can support each other, as opposed to sort of like a top-down organizational structure.
Thanks, Marina.
Okay, so I'll continue with the questions. Thank you. I think we can build on those last comments from Marina. So I'd like to ask the panelists, from your own experience, how can we inspire members, for example, of the ICANN network to share their experiences and remain both active and engaged with the network? So maybe I'll ask Carolina to respond first, as she's very heavily involved in the Caribbean Marine Atlas Initiative and will have faced similar challenges.
Bueno, bien, yo creería que lo primero
Well, I think that the first thing that we need to do is to create spaces such as this that will give us access to the ICANN email lists, or to get in touch with people who are present here today, to be able to outreach and to establish contact with them. Now, I think based on our experience, it would be extremely important to try to make the better use of the platforms that we have, so that we can share all this ocean information. That has been key because it allows for better opportunities for training, for establishing best practices, for publishing different types of documents that could help you create your atlas or understand how to create your atlas. So there are a series of instructions on a web page that can be made use of. And I think all of this can help you become an active member and to really become more involved in this effort.
That's great, Elena. Laurie, would you comment? Because you mentioned in your presentation, you, I think, literally have hundreds of partners across the Digital Coast Initiative.
Yeah, and so I would build off what Carolina said. I do think that having forums to talk and share are really critical. We don't work directly with those hundreds of thousands of folks. We work within networks of networks. So I think that's something to think about. So for example, one of the groups that we work very closely with is the Association of State Floodplain Managers. They have a network, they have a professional association for floodplain managers that is, I think they're almost at 20,000 members right now. And so we work with them to find opportunities to share these messages and to share this data that can go out to their conferences, that can go out to their regional meetings, and kind of use those forums to kind of send the information out. I do think, though, that it is really important to have meetings where people can come together, and that's where with our partnership group, we try at least once a year. They were in person, now with COVID, they're virtual, so that's been a little bit challenging. The virtual environment is a little challenging to make all of this work, for sure. But having that space, a couple of days for folks to sit down, to focus on each other's platforms and kind of really think about what's available and how it could be used, and to sort of share issues and to find those connections about where synergies can be made are just really, really important. I think you guys have had this ICANN network has been going for a number of years with conferences. They're really great. I think the key is finding the gaps between the conferences that can keep your energy going, right? Is it a regional meeting? Is it a very active listserv. And so kind of honing what meets the best needs of the members to keep momentum going in between the big the big gatherings and the big forums where people are sharing those ideas. They get people energized, they get people motivated, they get people thinking, but people go back to their desks, they get a little busy and distracted. And so having something in between those major meeting points really helps build networks and carry momentum. And that's been very helpful for our partnership.
Yeah, Marie, that definitely resonates with the some of the experience of ICANN. When we have our workshops, certainly you can feel that energy, but then we go back to our day jobs, and yes, there are definitely challenges in keeping that sense of community alive. Anya, I'd address the question to you as well, because through the ACMA, you've experienced this, and now with the Benguela Current Initiative, it's something that you would have to address as well.
I think it's also very important for ICANN to actually make people aware of what they have to offer, and being a beneficiary of that with having ICANN experts in the region, not only for the Benguela Current region, but the ACMA region, to give us training and GeoNode. I think people must understand that ICANN is not just a network of atlases. They actually offer a lot of assistance and advice to develop your own atlas. And once again, from our own experience, I just want to say that sometimes I think we're too impatient. We want to have a product quickly. You know, we get the training and we don't understand what all is behind that. But from my experience, I can just say we need to be patient, and the products will come. And I'm very optimistic at the moment, because we are in a phase with the Benguela Current Convention where we finally, after I don't know how many years, we get our products done. And that ICANN definitely had a role to play in my connection with ICANN. But I don't think people realize what ICANN actually has to offer on the training expertise side. They just look at the products and say, oh, we don't need that, or we don't want this, or so, but on human capacity as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, the expertise that's held within the people in the network. And Conor, again, how does this kind of relate to your experience in the European Atlas of the Seas?
Well, you know, I was thinking here, I'm looking at this from a different point of view, different perspective. We don't have any problems, because we're like similar to Laurie, we're built on systems of systems. We're not having problems with the ingestion into it. And we're not having any problems with participation within the European Atlas. For us, it's all about outreach to the European citizen. And that's what we're pushing all the time, to try and show the value of a marine atlas. And to that end, we're always monitoring the amount of numbers and the visitors we have, how we're picked up in the media. And last year we went to the full whole way, a whole 9 yards, and got the atlas translated into the 24 official languages of the European Union, including Gaelic. Ned, as you'd like, I'm sure you'd be pleased to hear. So for us, it's probably like we're at the other end of that question. We are not worried about trying to have people supporting the atlas. We're worried about getting the public using the atlas, because we're in a very strong position in terms of our funding and the interest of our funders, which is the European Commission, because they very much believe in the atlas.
Okay, thank you. Marina, are you still with us? I don't see you on the panel at the moment.
No, Marina had to disconnect.
Okay, no problem. So I'd just like to then move on to the last question for our panelists. And one challenge that ICANN is facing is how to better share the innovations from the projects around the world. And are there experiences that you can share from your own Atlas community that could help kind of address that issue? And Laurie, I might start with you this time.
Sure, if I can get myself off mute there. I think that, I think it's challenging to share the innovations. I think when you, one of the things, I guess so speaking from my Digital Coast experience, one of the things that has been a bit of a challenge with the partnership is that we have folks that serve very different roles across the partnership. So we have folks that are executive directors, presidents, CEOs, kind of at a very high level, as well as folks that are data analysts, mappers, technologists, web developers. And so trying to find the best way to share all of that information is really important. One of the things that we have tried to do when we have meetings that really try to make sure that those meetings, people are coming and getting something, they're leaving with something meaty, they're leaving with something that they can kind of dig into. And so one of the things that we try to do is adjust the agenda so that at the beginning, it's sort of big picture, it's vision. There's a lot that people can understand, like regardless of the seat that you fill, you understand what the mission and the vision is and the goal that we are trying to move forward on. As we work through the meetings, we kind of then parse down into more targeted discussions. So for example, if there are folks that are working with policy and they really want to focus on doing some Hill advocacy to our political partners, they have some room to meet and discuss. We have time for the technical folks to get together and meet and discuss. And then we have folks that are thinking about different issues and how the data can be applied and where they can meet. So kind of setting up a forum so that people get lots of different tastes and kind of can buy into the big picture, but then also have an opportunity to dig in where their interests and expertise lay. That seems to be very helpful in not only getting your buy-in, building that network, but then also helping to keep some momentum moving forward post-meeting.
Okay, thank you. And Carolina, you spoke a little about training and sharing the knowledge that's already within the ICANN network. So building on that, do you see ways we can better share the innovations from the various projects that are part of ICANN and even beyond ICANN?
Bueno, para los que no forman parte y de hecho,
Well, for those who are still not a part of it, I think that this is precisely the goal that we have in our region. We want them to really ensure that these are lessons well learned. And if with the new atlases come up, we analyze what is new in them, and then evidently with all these technical resources, we can download them and analyze them. Now, I'm always advertising all ICANN products, and I think that this bulletin that is published is very important because it allows us to evidence the progress made and to acknowledge the progress made by others. And sometimes it really includes improvements in the deploy of charts, and GSI sometimes is what is most important to us. So we're always trying to keep abreast of all these innovations and to be able to replicate all these innovations in our platform. And that is, I think, what we're attempting to do.
Thank you. And Carolina, thank you for mentioning the bulletin or the newsletter that is published on 2 or 3 times a year by ICANN. And those of you listening in can find that on our website. So please go to the website icann.iote.org to check out our materials, but also to get in touch with us and get your name added to our listserv so that you can kind of stay in the loop on this as well. And Anya, in regards to this challenge of sharing innovations from projects around the world, how do you think we can do that better?
I think that is actually quite a challenging thing for ICANN, because I think what we often do, we share a lot of information. I mean, there's so much information out there on the internet, and to filter out what is relevant for you. And I think we have had the experience with the Odin Africa project, with the African Marine Atlas, that you know, the most innovative technology is not necessarily the best one for everybody. And we had to change that. We changed software, tailor-made software twice, just to now probably move over to open source GeoNode. So I think it's difficult because we've got such a diverse audience, and what will work in Europe might not work in Africa. And I think we must not always go and look for newer technology, new developments, you know, while others are still trying to keep up. You know, I think it would be nice if we could more standardize things, but then we've got different audiences, and, you know, I know Caribbean Marine Atlas also uses GeoNode, and that's our big example that we were working on. But I know that when we had somebody coming in here new for our MSP project, they said, but there must be much better technologies out there. Yes, but they're not open source and they don't work for us in the long term. So it is a challenge, and I think we should look at what is needed where, or what we have for what situations.
Yeah, I think this is a great point to bring Connor in, because you mentioned the technologies and the open source area. And I know, Connor, this is close to your heart in terms of open data. So if you'd like to kind of round off on this question in terms of your reflections on maybe how this whole open data paradigm could kind of help us better share innovations from projects around the world.
Well, I'd like to reflect there, or repeat there, or emphasize what Anya just said. Very definitely, there needs to be some sort of technical reviewing going on, technology reviewing going on, maybe through newsletter or from on the ICANN website, where share their experiences with the different software packages that exist, because there's so much demand on people to go and use the latest and the greatest in terms of software. And I know you're looking at GeoNode, and GeoNode is a great piece of software. For us, we're using things like GeoNetwork in the EMODnet, and in the Atlas of the Seas, we're using Esri server in the background, and different JavaScript technologies in the front end. But the problem is, where do you find out what technologies are the best and how to use them? And the best way for people in the ICANN network to find out is from asking their peers, asking each other and sharing with each other. I mean, the great example I have of this is a technology which is used in the Marine Observation Data Network, which is coming out from NOAA, which has been used all around the world now, but it passed by word of mouth from data managers to data managers at conferences. It's a technology called, I think it was developed for the Digital Coast. I think originally it's called AirDAP. And it's been taken up all by data managers all around the world purely by word of mouth. There was nothing written for people to go and no reports written advising them to do it. So by advising each other and sharing our experiences on these things, it's probably the most thing we can do with the technologies for sharing and creating maps. From the open data point of view, it's very important that when you are publishing open data, or you're in a government that's decided to publish open data, to have the proper standard licenses associated with the data sets. For us today at EMODnet, because this is something we're moving into now as well, we're using the Creative Commons BY license. And the reason why you need to have these licenses is because people who want to use your products need to be assured that the license attached with them is a recognized, established license. So even when you're releasing maps through your Atlas, and you're saying these maps are downloadable, you can use them anywhere, you need to say that definitively by associating a license with the map. And this is, we're guilty of not being perfect with this ourselves, but it's a big task. So you just keep working out as much as you can. Now, in terms of also with the open data world, particularly in the marine sector, is sticking with standard data formats and standard metadata associated with them. Please do not try and reinventing the wheel, because once you start doing that, and using, even though people may say this data format is better, this new data format is better, or we should use these new latest semantic web technologies for the metadata, you then isolate yourself from this, you run the possibility of isolating yourself from the open source software that's been developed to support the data, the open data formats that existed up to now. Maybe it's formats that
bring you to a close there, Conor.
maps. Sorry,
we're running out of time, so I might just bring you to a close there. I think you're,
you
you're
asked,
kind of opening up
speak
lots
for
of
hours.
avenues that are certainly at the heart of ICANN considerations. If you could post the link to that initiative that you mentioned from NOAA, that could be helpful for some of our viewers as well. Just put it in the chat. So that brings us to an end of this panel session, and I'd really like to thank all our 4 contributors to the panel, to Laurie, Conor, Anya, Carolina, and of course Marina. I think they gave us some very valuable insights. I was trying to take some notes as we went along, and some of the things that, I suppose, keywords that just jumped out for me are things like we're addressing broad audiences and different audiences. Also, we have to be cognizant of the people on the fringes or even the front line of change and on our coastal fringes as well. There's a digital divide out there. So while maybe us techies want to do use the latest technology and the fanciest approaches, this can be a real challenge in trying to reach some of the audiences which do not have access to the most recent digital technologies. And I think also Conor brought a different perspective from that there near the end when he spoke about open data and not always going for the next best thing, because then you can isolate yourself. I think a key issue there was networks and having networks of networks as well, and interactions. I think it was Laurie talked about the importance of meeting face-to-face and online even to share knowledge and experiences and to create space and time for us to share and meet. And this was also something close to Carolina's heart, I would believe, in terms of making sure that the knowledge within a network such as ICANN gets to be shared. And I think Anya gave a great example of that, saying that they have found it invaluable in the development of the ACMA. So I think there was lots of really interesting ideas there. And again, I'd like to thank all of our contributors.